how do you deal with online hate, man? I mean, I see, I as a small creator, as I've gotten bigger. I mean, we've done well, but I don't have near the comments you have, but
Yeah.
it still hits, it still hurts, it still stings.
Mhm.
I had a comment the other day said worst podcast ever. No idea who this person was.
Yeah.
It's not the worst I've heard way worse.
Could have been a bot for all you know.
Yeah, but I'm like, it didn't feel good. It's not like
Yeah,
motivating.
it's terrible.
I had another comment the other day. I was talking about how I've grown the podcast as fast as we have, and one of the ways has been with YouTube Shorts, and I was talking about how I get views, blah blah. And someone just commented, "It looks like you eat your views, fatty." Which great comment. I just commented. I was just like, "That's great. Thank you for making me laugh. That's a good one." But you deal, I would say, with a lot of visceral hate online, attacking you as a person, who you are, your character. You've had hit pieces written against you.
Yep.
How do you deal with that? Does it bother you anymore? Did it bother you and it doesn't as much now?
It used to bother me a lot more. Not so much anymore. You do kind of have to let it roll off your back, and you have to remember that a lot of people who are very online, it is so easy to make that disconnect when you're interacting online. I've been nasty and disrespectful to people online, and in a lot of ways, receiving the hate that I do has made me nicer than I used to be, because I know how it feels to be on the receiving end of it. So it's made me a much more careful person in the way I engage with others. I try to have grace on the people who speak this way online, remembering that there is that kind of that wall between us. And if I were to meet them in person, they would probably be nice. We'd probably be able to have a nice conversation. Yeah. But we're in this environment where everyone's trying to one up each other and clap back, and who can come up with the most creative insult. It's a culture that kind of can bring out the worst in the absolute best person. I a while ago tweeted something of it. The line from Batman where Harvey Dent says, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I shared that picture of Harvey Dent, and I changed this quote to say, you either die a hero or you stay on Twitter long enough for people to realize you're actually retarded. And that's true. I don't care who you are. I don't care how smart you are. Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson's brilliant, and he's helped so many young men, especially lost young men. And people think he's the biggest idiot in the world, and they'll say the nastiest things about this guy. I don't care who you are. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how much you have accomplished. People, there's always going to be the peanut gallery. So you just have to remember that. Try to have grace, and hope that responding with as much grace as you can will have some sort of an effect. Who knows? We won't know until we get to heaven.
How many people have turned their life to Christ because you were nice to them on Twitter? Hey, you're not.
I also have this very disrespectful streak. I mean, that's part of. I've always had that. I'm very sarcastic.
Yeah. Which makes you good for satire. Right?
It makes me good for satire, but sometimes I have erred on the side of being nasty towards people. So I struggle with it too. I think having grace on the haters, remembering that sometimes I'm a hater too. So
as you've grown in popularity, has it had any type of effect on your family? Because that was the one concern my wife had when I mentioned politics, because as the show gets bigger, people are very visceral when it comes to politics. And she's like, hey, I'd appreciate. And the reason, I'll give you a quick story and then we'll wrap up the pod. And this is why she feels this way. So throwback to Biden, Trump, election year. So 2020, right? That was the election year. My wife went to count votes in Cobo Hall. Cobo Hall, it's not Cobo anymore. It was a huge center downtown Detroit. They do their car show there. It's just a big thing. So she went to count votes. Okay. True story. You can call it whatever you want, but this did happen. In a counting situation, you're supposed to have 3 people at each table. You're supposed to have a Republican representative, a Democrat, and then an actual person to make sure both are going through, and then going through each ballot, making sure they're correct. What started happening was Republicans started to leave to go on break and eat lunch, and they locked the doors and did not let them back in. So you had a bunch of Republicans trying to get back in the building because they went out and then they wouldn't let them back in.
Totally corrupt. We all know this stuff happened.
And there were, 3 Democrats sitting at one table. There were not both parties represented. So there was all this stuff happening in front of her. Crazy stuff. And I'm sure there's more that so the police showed up. Republicans are banging on the door, like, let us in.
What was it that Stalin said? Like, Stalin said, it's not the voters that matter, it's the people who are counting them.
It's very true.
Same technique.
And so we saw firsthand, you can draw whatever conclusion you want from the 2020 election.
Mm-hmm.
All I'm going to say is there were weird things happening.
Yep.
And I'm sure it happens on both sides. I'm sure that there are plenty of things. I do not put anything past the right to do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I am saying what we witnessed, or what my wife witnessed firsthand, was very one-sided to the left. So she just made a post on Instagram being like, hey, this is what I saw. This is where I'm at. This is what's going on. And it blew up. I mean, we had writers, art, news, whatever. And then she started getting the comments of like people trying to dox us.
Yep.
People trying to, like I told Anna, I'm like, you need to delete any picture of our house off of social media.
It's frightening. It's almost demonic.
I stayed up the whole night,
yeah.
like literally with, a GUN YouTube in my head. In my hand. I'm like, I'm not sleeping. So like for a 24-hour period, I was very on edge.
Mm-hmm.
So we did get a small taste to just the visceral hate when you jump into politics. And so I think as a result, Anna's been very cautious of wanting me to dive into that.
Yeah.
Given your continued success in your career, have you seen any of that happen? Has there been any type of effect on your family? Has there been a concern for you guys?
Not as much as I would have thought when I was early on in this. I have quite a lot of exposure right now. I keep my family pretty insulated from it as best I can. And I don't come home every day and tell my wife all my hate comments.
All the nastiness.
And I tell my wife to stay off my Twitter. Please don't read my Twitter because it'll distress you. So she doesn't. She's off of it. But I've had a few people try to dox me, and I've been able to shut it down. Haven't really run into much of an issue, honestly. People are a lot more bark than bite, especially online. You're not going to run into serious issues unless you're like a prominent politician.
Yeah.
Those guys are a lot more exposed than we are. So.
Doxing, for those that don't know, is basically people trying to get your real address and do something to you in real life.
Yes.
And that could be calling the feds on you. That could be showing up. I mean, just doxing is really just the point of trying to get your real address and cause some sort of distress. Right. For those that don't know what it is.
Yep, exactly.
For a lot of people, doxing just looks at people will put in threats and like you'll have this, FBI show up at your house.
Yeah.
And a lot of that happens to a lot of streamers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think people were like, what's doxing?
Yeah. No, it's a real thing. It hasn't been that bad, honestly. It hasn't been that bad. Seth, my boss, is a little more famous than I am, and he's gotten some of it too. But it's not that bad. You got to be careful. You got to be smart about what you post online, and it's not bad.